Okay, let's take a look now at what's taking up paper in the papers. Dipti Laurent is with me in studio. Dipti, just looking even at a glance here, it looks like there's one topic on the front page of all of the French papers. It's the plans to change the immigration laws. And we can see here, apparently they're setting the record straight.
That's right. He's the man behind that immigration bill, Gérard Collomb, who I'll get to in a minute. La Croix, we spoke about this earlier, actually, Eve, about this very contentious immigration bill. And as you said, nearly all the pages are headlining on this. Think about immigration. That's what La Croix, the Catholic paper, says on its front page, sort of imploring French lawmakers to think about the humanitarian side of this, to remember the humanity in this issue, saying they must first find a common response to dealing with immigration. That includes involving everyone who's concerned by it, including immigrants, which Lacroix says hasn't really been done so far by the government. Libé, the left-leaning paper, is leading with a rather ironic front page, because you have here Macron shaking hands with a migrant while at the same time seeking to deport more of them. So they're a bit more bittersweet about it.
Yeah, pretty harsh, really, that left-leaning paper on these planned changes to the law.
Well, Libé in its editorial is even looking at whether anyone really wants the bill to be this harsh, and they actually call it, quote, unbalanced. They say French voters, according to a recent poll, are worried about the rise in immigrants and asylum seekers arriving in France. But at the same time, when they do arrive in the country, they want to ensure that they have a humanitarian welcome. It's not all negative, though. Libé also reports that some associations are pleased with some of the proposals in the bill, like increasing the length of residency permits and extending protection for migrant children to their brothers and sisters, which up to now hasn't been the case, and also speeding up the process to issue their papers.
Okay, meanwhile, it looks like a different story from Le Figaro. Their main story already pointing out that this is dividing even Macron, the president's own camp. What does its editorial say?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, this bill is contentious not just between the left and right divide. Within Macron's party itself, there are people who think it is too harsh. Le Figaro is not really of that opinion. In their editorial, they say that while France must provide asylum to people who need it as a human right, the number of asylum seekers in past years has, quote, skyrocketed, and they say the government's first task is distinguishing who is an asylum seeker, who has a right to asylum, and who is simply a migrant seeking to move to France. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the man behind the bill is French Interior Minister Gérard Collomb. He defends the proposed legislation in an interview with Le Parisien newspaper. In fact, the readers get a chance today to grill him on it. One reader, for instance, asks him why France can't take in more migrants despite being one of the richest countries in the world. Well, his answer is, it's not a question of welcoming them, but welcoming them well in a satisfactory manner so that they can build their lives here.
Noticing there in the top corner of that paper, Egypti, Le Pen, apparently an exclusive from the former leader of the far-right National Front, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who's about to release a book.
That's right. His book, well, it'll be the first volume, I believe, in probably a series of his autobiographies that will be released next week. The first volume, Le Parisien explains, is important because Le Pen has lived, this is Jean-Marie Le Pen, the founder of the far-right party. He's lived through a big chunk of modern French history. He's lived under 3 different republics. He's brushed shoulders with Charles de Gaulle, François Mitterrand, Jacques Chirac, some of the grandest French presidents. He went to war in Indochina. He went to war in Algeria. He, of course, spearheaded the rise of the far right in France. This man is a relic of history. His daughter, Marine Le Pen, the current leader of the far right party, she gets a very small mention in this book. Of course, the two have a very fractious relationship ever since she kicked him out of the party that he founded last year. In the book, he also talks about losing an eye while climbing a tent during a rally back in the day. That's sort of sent up in this cartoon by Le Parisien, where Le Pen says to his daughter...
Climbing a tent?
It's beyond belief. He says in this cartoon, he says, in my first book, I'll explain how I lost my eye. And in the second book, I'll explain how my daughter lost the presidential election. Touché.
Ouch. Yeah, it's probably be a pretty popular read, though, here in France. Well, let's move on to some maybe more positive French news now. And he's also making the front papers. It's Martin Fourcade, who's really... The French are complaining that they're not winning as many medals as they wanted in these Winter Olympics, but he's certainly doing his bit.
That's right. He's done more than his bit, actually. He's helped propel France to yet another gold medal. He's on the front page of L'Équipe, the French sports paper. He actually helped propel them to a gold medal in the mixed biathlon, Le Grand Mixed. That's what L'Équipe says on its front page, the great mixed team. Martin Fourcade now has 5 gold medals, including 3 at these games. The latest medal also helped push France up the medal tally board, so that's good news. In Le Figaro, his peers talk about having only admiration for a young man described as being humble, intelligent, sociable, and honest in his own personal defeats. He brings a fresh take on sports professionalism, Le Figaro says, in contrast with the behavior of his colleagues who kick a football around and earn millions doing it. That's why I quote, Martin, we love you.
I have to say, it's so beyond me, the level of sporting prowess that they have. But this next story I can relate to. It might be a good deterrent to anyone who's ever been tempted to fraud the self-checkout counters at the supermarket. I have to say, I just don't like these self-checkout counters to start with.
Well, I avoid them generally because they never work when I'm there and I end up having to call somebody, which defeats the whole purpose. Well, the French paper 20 Minutes explains that a Munich court has fined a man 208,000 euros for frauding the self-checkout counter. The 58-year-old man tried to repackage up to 47 euros worth of veal liver in a fruit bag and pass it off as fruit last year. He didn't explain why he did it, but the judge said the fine was proportionate to his income because he earns about 24,000 euros a month. So nobody really understands why he would find the need.
He didn't economically need it. He didn't. Maybe just curiosity to see could he
get away with it.
Seriously anti these systems and was trying to get them outlawed.
Perhaps,
who knows?
But he's not contesting the fine. Maybe it's proof though that machines can't replace everything that he.
There you go. See, that might have been what was behind it. Jytika Laurent, thanks a lot for that review of the papers. We're